Welcome back to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, a window into the soul of the North Fork of Long Island. We'll delve into the pulse of our community, its pressing issues, promising opportunities, and the rich stories that weave our shared history. I'm your host, Christopher Bianchi, and for episode 71, we sit down with Thomas McKenzie, a resident of the North Fork. With a rich and storied past, Thomas takes us on his journey through his ancestry and his time growing up in Elmhurst, Queens, to his days serving as a court officer and working his way up, weaving tales of his encounters with famous personalities and myriad experiences that shaped his life. As we listen to Thomas, he also tells us about his decision to move to the North Fork. We hear his heartfelt reflections on life, the lessons he's learned, and his hopes for the future. So I hope you enjoy episode 71 with Thomas McKenzie. This episode was recorded June 6, 2024. Thank you so much for coming on to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast today. Looking forward to talking with you.
It's the least I can do for the library.
Thank you. And if you could state your name and where you were born and raised.
My name is Thomas McKenzie, Thomas Francis Patrick McKenzie. I grew up in Elmhurst. I have a house there that I lived in all my 81 years. I now have lived out here as my legal address most of the time in New Suffolk. The people are very good there. They only took up one petition against me because of my horse. I wanted to put him on my property. And they came with burnt torches, but nevertheless, I did leave him in the town with my neighbor who committed suicide. But that's another story. But anyway, the people were upset about my horse, and I had a side yard of 100 by 200 feet, but the town said I needed 40 feet from the neighboring property. Fine. Working in the courthouse, I had breakfast in the morning with like 4 or 5 judges, and I explained it to them, and they said, you have a right, because I live on a corner. 3 sides of my property are on the street, but they insisted I had to be 40 feet from the street as well as 40 feet from the neighboring property, which gave me 20 feet. So I said, gee, that's interesting. When one of you people asked me that, has someone living on Donna Lane who's a relative whose horse has more than my one, go right to the property line. They started to look around. So they said no. I mean, I had a design, all sorts of things went on. And finally, the fun part of it was the woman who started all the trouble, who lived across the street, whose husband I took to the hospital twice, whose battery I changed in his car and so forth. She wanted to know, what am I going to do now? So instead of telling her I'm keeping the horse down the street with another neighbor who has a horse, I'm going to get a motorcycle. I could see the look on her face. That wasn't interesting. It means noise. So I went down to Legend's restaurant, and I met some college professors there who had motorbikes, and they brought them up to have a drink at my house, and they lined them up across the street from her house by my property. And I could see her with the benign going, Then the next instant she came over and she wanted to know why a single man like me needed such a big house. And I think she might have thought I was gay or something, because we have a few gay people living in the neighborhood who visited me. And I said, no, it was because of my wild parties in the Hamptons. They more or less threw me out. And, I can put 200 people in the backyard here. Well, this set her off, and she goes running away. Then the next time a tree limb fell, and I'm trying to saw it up so I can burn it in my fireplace. And she asks me, why am I clearing my property? And at the rate I'm going, it would take me a lifetime with this one branch and all the trees. So I told her it was for the gypsy encampment. I'm part gypsy. Then we had the thing with the school. They were thinking about closing down the school, so I investigated it. And there's a restricted covenant for the green field across from the school, diagonally across from the school, which the Archdiocese of New York gave the school as long as the school stays in business. They inherited the land from Mrs. Sullivan in 1931 and so forth. So I said, if you close the school, the land goes back to the Archdiocese of New York, and I'll buy it off them and I'll build a church, So I could see quite a few people like, oh God, a church bells, all that. So with that, it was kind of fun. I've had no more trouble with the neighbors in the neighborhood, other than now at 81, I realized I matched their ages, and many of them have moved away to, assisted living facilities. And they all said goodbye, and I was happy. And if anyone needed any assistance, like just a ride home somewhere, I would do it. Other than that, my lifetime has been pretty good. I never got married. That was a mistake. I took out a mafioso's daughter, and I took out a Jewish girl who looked like Maureen O'Hara, and everyone thought with the red hair and freckles she was Irish, and she was going to convert her to Catholicism. I'm, I guess, a fervent Catholic. And I started out, I went to all Catholic schools. I went to one of the 100 top prep schools. It was a scholarship school in Brooklyn, Bishop Loughlin. And my mother started to lose her eyesight, and I was a very sick kid. I mean, I can remember the doctor coming to the house when I was about 10 years old, and he said, I send for an ambulance to take him to the hospital, but I'm afraid the shock will kill him. And that night, my uncle came in, and I couldn't breathe. I told him it was the winter time. Open the window, just open the window. So he opened the window, and I put my head out, and I breathed, and I retched up a lot of phlegm. And I was fine. The next day, the doctor came and said it was a miracle. But after that, when I was in high school, it was an all-boys school. We only had the girls visit us on Wednesday afternoon when we had dances. And I got the kissing degrees, mononucleosis, and I can't remember. At that time, I was too young to go out kissing girls, So, but I lost about a month's schooling, and they were going to leave me back, but, I sort of made up for it. But I remember going to the Old Flower Fifth Avenue Hospital and speaking to a specialist, and they were all, what's going on? My poor mother losing her eyesight. I was very worried. So I started college, and I saw my father, who had a nice job, but not, he was a mechanical job. He painted. He invented a lot of things during the war for submarines, for which he had government contracts. And I saw he became very quiet, and he was very upset that my mother was suffering like she was. And I could see he was having a hard time. So I told him, I'm going to stop going to school for a year or so, go to work. I went out and I got a job at the phone company. They were going to give me a management job because I finished a test they gave me to engineering students that I got through faster than most engineering students. And they were going to give me a management job, which meant more money, of course. So I go in to see the big boss, who looked at my resume and saw I went to Catholic schools, and he was a Mason with the tie, pin the button, everything on, except flashing lights saying I'm a Mason. And I even gave him the signal that he could promote me. He refused to give me a management job. So, stayed for 7 years, a mistake. Within the first 3 months, I was doubling my salary by doing overtime. I was the only one who understood this plan they had. I was 20 years old, and I helped redesign all the telephone companies out here. And this was 60 years ago. The Matter, in those phone companies, if you had like a Persian 7 telephone and you want to call someone else at the same, you didn't have to dial Persian 7, you just dialed the 4 numbers. Then we had a lot of party lines. People would live into the woods, and you had to ring twice, 3 times, and everyone would listen to your business. So it was funny. We had a big cutover. Even got a cigarette lighter I found showing the cutover. And it was a nice job with nice people. It was funny, we were inside, we all wore shirts and ties, and it was diarrhea, but we didn't deal with the general public. So we went along good. And I remember one time, it was kind of funny. At that time, you did not have to belong to the union. We didn't have union shop in New York State. So we had this fellow, and he hated the company. And I tried to tell him, look, I'll join the union. I believe in it. I said, but, why do you hate the company so much? I have a job here. You try to stop us doing work. You wanted to turn over a truck during a strike. So he got very indignant one day. I'm making a big $58.50 when everyone else is making $50 a week. And he says, how come you're making so much money? I said, well, if you want to sit down, we can talk about it. No, I want to know right now. So after I said, why are you so, against the company? I said, well, if you want, I'll leave the union. You don't want to lose me for the $1.50 a week dues. So he said, well, how come you're making so much more money? I said, well, Pete, I'm making so much more money, and everyone's listening to this because no one spoke up to this man. I said, because I'm 21, or going on 21, I have 2.5 years of college, and he was of Italian extraction. And I said, and I'm Irish, because half the people in the company were Irish with brogues. They hired the least costly labor, and they were off the boat type. So that was funny. So they made me management twice. So I left. They wanted to give me another promotion. Mm-hmm. So I left because they wouldn't make me what we called a telephone engineer, which meant nothing. But it meant more money, and you were next level up. Mm-hmm. So I worked for Harvey Radio and Hammond organs, and I dealt with the churches, the smaller churches. Then I passed a test for court officer. Of 34,000 people, I was the only one who got 100 on the test. I go for my first interview, and I said, look, I don't want to work overtime. What court doesn't have overtime? So you could only go in the lower courts. So I took the family court. I went down for the interview. And I'm interviewed by a black man with the name of Hammond, like Hammond organist. Remember? Oh, this is not a job for you. This is not a job for you. I said, I think it is. She says, well, no, I'm not. So I said, okay. I got on the elevator, and I see two well-dressed men who had to be judges, and this woman with a lot of papers. And I said, madam, do you work here? And she said, yes. I said, counselor. And I'm saying, well, I didn't know they call lawyers counselors. I said, I'm so-and-so. I'm number one on the list. And I was told this is not a job for me. Oh, well, no, I don't know what to say. I said, well, I'm going to see my uncle. And she says, who is your uncle? And I said, he's the editor of the New York Daily News. She grabbed me. No! She drops all the papers on the floor. The two judges, one of them grabbed, no, don't do that. They had a big scandal about turning somebody away, a month before. So with that, what's your telephone number? So I take my time going home. When I get home, my mother said, there's a Mr. So-and-so who happened to be this woman's nephew. It was all family-oriented, the family court. It's like a Pretoria police station, if you understand what I mean. So he calls me. I call him back. Yes. I see you. So you have the job. When do you want to begin? I said, tomorrow. Why so soon? And he said, because I may look dumb, sir, but I'm not stupid. The next day, the pension changes. I was the last employee they got. So what did they do? They sent my pension up, but they put me in tier 2. So I complained. I said, oh, yes, all right, we'll give you seniority to that time. Mm. Then the next year I wrote another letter. How come I'm on this day and I'm in tier 2? And they wrote back apologetically, you're right, and they put me in tier 2. For that, I get about a quarter more of my pension. After 25 years, I started as a court officer, a senior court officer. In 1 month's time, because my intake did more in cases than the other 2 intakes put together. How did I do it? I told them. So they made me the captain over the 3 intakes. I made me a senior court officer. Then I came up with an idea that saved the family court like $100,000 a year in printing. I mean, they were amazed. No one thought of this. So I put my name on it. I told the chief clerk, my name's on it. I get it. So the thinking suggests they gave me a $500 increase in my salary for the year, and the administrative judge came down, who was never in New York City, so I took him around on the weekend. He had a lovely daughter, His daughter was a knockout. We were holding hands, after the second day. So anyway, he comes back in and he says, "You're going to have a brave future." I said, "Well, I'm going to be truthful with you, Judge. There's not much promotion here. I'm going to try to get to the Supreme Court. Civil court wants me. I'm number one on the list, back when I took the other senior court. I'm very high on that." Oh, okay. So he makes me a court clerk. Now, I started at $9,100. I went to 10-2 because I started a week before things changed under the contract. They gave me a $500 raise. They gave me an $1,800 raise, another raise for making me a senior clerk. Then they gave me $18 for the clerk. They gave me $500 more for senior court officer. And then the administrative judge came down, like my 5th month of working there, and I told him, "My God, I'm in charge of 3 intake clerks, 3 petition clerks, and doing petitions myself, 3 part clerks, 6 court officers, 3 parts. I take care of the attendance, the checks, everything. Absenteeism." Takes me over, walks me into the chief clerk, who had a straw going from his mouth into a bottle of booze that he would drink out of, in the bottom drawer of his desk. And he says, "In a minute," he says, "get off the phone now." I'll call you back. "Yes." "Make him a court clerk." All right. He said, "How much did you get?" $1,200 more. He said $1,800. "Make it $1,800. Then when he came back, so he made me a managing court clerk. So now I went from $9,100 to like $14,236, which was like double my court offices. What did they call me? In the telephone company, I was
engineer.
I can't. We had a name for it. It's called network operations, but as trunk facilities, I was a trunk assigner. And made the routes up on the different central offices and the traffic. I was the only one who understood things. I did a cutover one night where on Madison Avenue, uptown, all the information operators at night would go off duty. They'd throw a switch, and everything would go down to Broad Street. There was like 150 circuits. Now, they all went through maybe 4 or 5 different connects between the center. I did the work. The engineer, who was a drunkard, I did his work too. He's a management person. On the repeaters, the step-up transformers, the sound. And when they cut it over, it was the only cut over in the phone company they ever had that size. They never had anything more. So they came down, they gave me a pencil set, and they told the man, "I'm going to be leaving soon. You keep it. Why are you leaving?" And I pointed to the boss who was looking over. I said, "Because he won't promote me. They're promoting other people here that don't have an outstanding like I do, and have less time than I do. One of them is not even a citizen, and he was appointed ahead of me. So please take your thing back and give it to someone else." And they listened. And we had like 108 people. So one day this boss came out and he said, "Why didn't you tell us you were here?" I said, "Well, I came in and the supervisor wasn't how to use the bathroom. You see my cufflink." So I said, "John, cut it out. You don't have to talk to me. I'm not talked that way." I said, "John, in my neighborhood, we wouldn't let you buy a house." And 108 guys laughed. So he came out screaming. So I turned around. It was a shop steward. They all stood up. And they said, "You know what that means? We're going to have a walkout." "Oh, no. So he sat down. Then another time, the Long Island Railroad was late. All the management people came in late. Nothing was said. One day we have a trouble in Brooklyn where we work, and we came in like 10 minutes late. The boss said, "You're going to sit at your desks until 9:15, and you're not going to get paid for that 15 minutes. So I went in the shop steward. I said, "Go outside and say it was a joke." "Well, I'm not." I said, "Well, you know how we have this? We won the case in court, and about the community fund, like the phone company gives so much money, and then they expect the employees to pledge so much money." I said, "Well, guess what? We're going to pledge nothing, and the management employees will have to make up the difference." I said. Then one day, he's having an affair with his secretary, and I see this guy walk in, and She recognizes him. He walks in and he starts beating the hell out of this boss. So I walk over, so I said, oh, this is awful. I said, you better call for security. I'm saying, kick him in the ass. The guy's kicking him. I mean, he was bloody. When they finally came in, security, I said, they grabbed hold of the guy. They called the cops and all. And so I said, he was defending himself. The man threw the first punch at him. I said it was self-defense. So the cops didn't know what to do. So after they convinced him they have a strip search, they both let it. And I got a petition up for the girls that work in the office that they could no longer work with a man of such low moral character. And they would like a transfer. Well, the upper echelon said the vice president, Isley, comes over. And they just point to me. It comes over to my dad. What the hell's going on here? And I told him, Jesus, this and that. And, what the hell are we going to do about this? So most of the girls quit at lunchtime, went over to a stockbrokerage outfit. They worked on the teletype machines, and they got like $25 raises, and all the benefits. So funny things happens. A neighbor comes to me and says, Tom, you work for the phone company. Yeah, look at this. And they show me the Village Voice, if you remember that newspaper. Mm-hmm. And in the Village Voice, they saw a priest in a picture disrobing a nun for some, stage program in the village. So I wrote a letter to the president as a stockholder, mentioning the citizens of the teaching literature and how come we advertise for operators in this newspaper that has this type of content next to the same page where prostitutes advertise themselves. My supervisor comes over to me and he says to me, tomorrow wear your good suit, just please for me. So I'm there, and about 9:30 a man walks in and says, you're to come with me. And in a regular Chrysler, but you could see it was nice, I went down to 126 West Street to the dining room, and who comes in but the president of the New York Telephone Company with the head of personnel services, the head of advertising, the man who's public relations. They all sit down to me, and they order steaks for lunch, me included. He gets up, they'll take it. They told me they're pulling the ads. The reason they put it in, they advertise all over so much. And the Village Voice just took it and placed it there. They're pulling the ad, but they'll pay for the rest of the year so no one gets angry. Okay. I go back to the office. I walk in, and I walk over, and I have no desk. I'm looking. Congratulations, you've been promoted to facilities assistant. What the hell that did, I don't know. Go up and see Mr. Romano. So I go up 2 more floors. I go into Mr. Romano. He says, oh, welcome, congratulations, everyone, congratulations. It takes me to this cubicle, not even maybe half the size. This is your desk. I have a desk. I don't have a phone. I don't even have good lighting. I said, well, what do I do? He says, I'll tell you. We'll have something for you. So a week goes by. I said, this is bullshit. So I walk across the hall. I see a phone. I take it. I throw the wire across. It was high enough with the ceiling, and I have a phone now. Then I get all my blueprints, put them on the 4 walls. I go out. I get a little curtain, hang it so you just can't look in my office. And, I get books, and I'm reading this and that about the phone company. And, weeks go by, and I realize to get rid of me, they put me there. So finally, one time I had a big to-do. I had to leave a management job because we worked on the UNIVAC 2 computer. It had 2,000 spots with it. Today, your home computer has 200,000. And what happened, they put me on nights, and I'm saying, look, I'm the only one here. We have a problem. I would get home at midnight. I fall asleep at maybe 6 a.m. They would call me at 9 a.m. What happened? I said, look, I wrote everything down minute by minute. I said, something's wrong with the tapes. They're all new tapes. I said, well, doesn't that tell you something's wrong with them? So anyway, the big boss comes out. What the hell's going on? He starts yelling at the boss, and he says, what did you do about it? So I said, well, in my book here, I gave everyone every night what was wrong with it. And I'm telling you, the tapes are bad. Prove it to me they're not. what the hell are you guys doing? He tells you that, you know what time we lost here, you know. Amex or Ampex, I think was the name of the company. They sent us 10,000 tapes where the trailer truck had to be put in the driveway at East 37th Street. And we could take them off there. So I figured I'm not going to do good with this sports. So I told them, look, I have to go back. This is not enough money. I live on the overtime money. I get paid this and that. I have to go back. So he says, okay, just give us some time. And on my report, he says, I want you to see this. I said, oh boy. He wrote, I didn't work there long enough for him to give me an efficiency report. Which is, they promoted me again. I had to wait a while, but then when I said I was leaving, they immediately promoted me. Stupid, I should have said the first week. Then I got disgusted. I had this into me. I'm saying, look, Ben, man was Kroll, Ben Kroll. I said, remember Felix Kroll? He didn't get, if you know, remember the guy who took the German army around. But anyway, they didn't want me to leave, so they gave me a 6-month leave of absence, saying, if you want, get another job. We'll pay your hospitalization until that company picks it up. Mm-hmm. I'm still getting my phone half price. So I go to Harvey Radio. They hire me immediately, but a bit less salary, you know. Mm-hmm. But I straightened out. They had 7 offices in the city, 1 in Queens, 2 in Brooklyn, 5 in Manhattan. And you'd bring your Moran speaker or something in, and they would send it back to our office in Long Island City called something distributing. And we would fix it. I had like 10, 12 repairmen, send it back, and so all that. But anyway, I get the court officer, and that was that. So in my 25th year, they walk into the office, and I was then the senior appellate term clerk. If I had the job now, I'd be making at least $145,000 a year. Okay? I was very good at taking tests. One time they put people ahead of me. I said, wait a minute. The first day I filed for that test, these other people filed after me. They have the same marking. You took those letters. You opened them up on the first thing. You made them 90101, 90102. I said, if I subpoenaed them, or I have my uncle at the Daily News subpoenaed him, what the hell's going to happen to you? So he looked at me. So he said, you give me the letter and I keep the job. And I said to Norman, don't think I'm ever going to go back and do the job. As I went back to be in a court office to get to the Supreme Court, I picked more juries in the first week than they ever picked in a month. I had those jurors going back and forth till they were, oh, no. So the judges loved me. One judge gave me a hard time, and he said one day to me, you know, you can go back to civil court. And I said, so can you. You're only in acting. I said, we're going to tell you something. You don't kick me in the gutter. His wife was there and some lawyers. I said, and no lawyer does either. You get something straight. I can have you back in civil court before you. I'll call my uncle, the Cardinal Archbishop of New York. He looked at me. Then we swore in Charlie Ramos, who had blonde hair, blue eyes. He said, I'm a Catalonian, a Castilian, Spaniard. His father owned 2,000 acres in Cuba, escaped Castro. His brother was a judge. His brother was a doctor. And he's being sworn in. So I called up Monsignor Missy because I took care of all the property the church sold. They had to get permission of the court, the third highest bidder. Mm-hmm. And I asked him if he could come. I said, Charlie Ramos graduated from Fordham. I'll see what, I won't know to that day. Okay. So I get a call. I get in at 7:30 to have a parking place because I got a parking permit. Mm-hmm. So he's coming. I said, okay. So I got over to 111 Center Street. I wait, and he comes in this black, checker cab, and he gets out, and he had that Buick smile, at the big, hello, Your Eminence, around. Oh, I remember from our dinner. My lady friend took me to the Cardinal's dinner. And I'll tell you a story about that someday, how George Steinbrenner helped me, and my lady friend. So I go walking in, and Hector says, he has to go to the magnetometer. I said, Hector, get the elevator right now, or you're going to to the tombs for the summer. Boom, that was my punishment. You went to the tombs, no air conditioning, no vacation. You were stuck there. So what does he do? We get on the elevator, we walk in, and Judge Edith, who's about 100 feet away from me, and there's 300 feet in the room, Charlie Ramos, and he looked, and there's Tom McKenzie, who said this wonderful man did more mental hygiene hearings. I won't tell you how, the only lawyer I set up the mental hygiene. And the leg off, that's another story. So I said, well, now, wait a minute. I said, and he's not recognizing the cardinal. And this little old Irish lady drops a mop, runs over, and on her knees, she slides in front of him. She grabs his head, and she kisses his ring. And he says to me, this is the part of the job I hate the most. So she gets up, and so and he's looking at me, and I knew he was nearsighted, so I got the window pole, and I went boom, 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 and everyone turned around. Mr. Chief Justice, the Cardinal Archbishop of New York, Cardinal John Cardinal O'Connor, and he's smiling, and everyone's giving that sort of European half bow. We all learned in Catholic school from the nuns. So with that, he walks up, and I'm going like that famous film you see of Charles de Gaulle going back to Paris, and there's a guy trying to part the crowds. I'm trying to part the judges, so we have a place for him to sit down. Finally, I said, oh, do we have a seat? And they go, So we sit down, and he's smiling, and finally I get up, and I said, on behalf of the clerks, I'm the world's largest fountain pen collector. I took a 1932 number 2 Waterman, that was a Waterman, and I gave it to him, and I said, this is from the clerks. It was from me. What I did, I had all the judges writing with fountain pens. I found gallons of ink from 1927 sitting up. And we had pictures around, and I said, just a little aside, you see all those cars there with the bug eyes? I said, do any of you know what kind of cars they are? I said, they're Pierce Arrows, made in New York. And Wilson, the Democratic district leader, who used to appoint the assistant DAs at $2,850 a year, sold every assistant DA a car at $2,850, and he had 3 years to pay it off. So they all looked at me, he knows where the bones are. So with that, I made a little speech, how it's a good friend and it's a pleasure to work, and we work as a team. And they said, where else on company time can I go be with a good friend, have a second opinion from his doctor brother, and go to confession at the same time? Well, it brought the house down. I used to do the eulogies for dead judges. They didn't know what to do, usually unsafe buildings. So I did a great one up in the Abyssinian Baptist Church for David H. Lawrence, who died, and I was the last one to see him at the crazy house. And in my eulogy, I mentioned how we had a very well-to-do couple, difference in ages, and an argument ensued in front of their son, who's a teenager, in which the father said, I only managed you because we were having a kid. And when he heard this, he ran away. They found him 2 days later. Naturally, the cops don't know what to do. So when anyone's a danger to themselves or anyone else, 939 in the mental hygiene law, they send him away for 2 weeks. So they get him over to, well, anyway, he ends up in Manhattan State. We were having hearings of a courtroom. And Judge Lawrence tells me about it, between about his posies and whatnot. And I remember once working for him for 1 day, and he knew about my mother. And I mentioned in the eulogy with the open casket in the Abyssinian Baptist Church with Calvin Butts, Reverend, and Mayor Dinkins there. No one got up to speak. Of the 50 or 60, I got up. The last one alive told me about his father. And we had this case. I mentioned it. And finally he asked the doctor, bipolar explorer, this, that, unfaithful recognition. Thank you, doctor. Stay right there. Tell me the truth. Yes. He said, do you love your parents? And the kid, yes. And they both hug each other. And he said, well, tell them, go over there and tell them you love them. They're all kids. He said, this case is dismissed. Where's the file? He said, next case. And I mentioned that. And they said, no. And they asked if I could put a rare pair of rosary beads in the casket that were blessed by the Pope. His son was a minister or some other, what's happening now at church? And the wife said, yes, she's steaming tears. The women there with the judge were tear. And I said, I don't know what more to say. But not seeing me for a month, he called me one day and he said, Tom, how are you? Good. How's your mother? And I said, who else would think of that? He was a team, he set things.
Okay.
With that, I said, well, I don't know what more I can say about him, other than it was a pleasure to have known him. Well, she's breaking out crying, the son's crying, people, and then I look over at Calvin Butts, and he looks at me, and Mayor Dinkins looks at me. So then I line up outside. The hearse comes, and they have the 62 court officers in their band line up 31 on each side. And as we go down Adam Clayton Powell Boulevard, they're playing the funeral march. I remember Judge Shorter in the wheelchair, retired, whose pocket watch I had fixed. That's another story with my collection of watches. And he looks up at me and he says, Tom, are you going to give me a send-off like this? He lived in a horse stable on 125th Street behind a brownstone. His wife, and every time you come down, the court officer would get out of the car to get him, and everyone sitting in front of the house would run into the house. I tell you, it was 25 years, I never missed a day.
Wow.
I'd go to court, the administrative judge would say, close the courts. I said, Judge, why don't you tell me at home? I don't have to take this trip in. So that, we had the Supreme Court, civil, criminal. We had the lower criminal court, the lower civil court, the family court. We closed the courts down. In Manhattan, any other boroughs followed suit. 2,000 cases had to be put over. And then there were some of them that were on trial. And, they went to the jury clerk. Oh, what I went through. Betty Furness. I showed her, look, we have a Walton-House refrigerator. I said, well, the food wasn't good. And she gives me a cupcake that's 2 days old. So I go to Judge Spiegel. He calls the guy over from the restaurant. We give them $5 per juror, for which they get a coffee or a soda, a sandwich, and a piece of cake as their lunch after they're charged. I finally got it where I told the judges, don't charge them, we save money. Wait until after. And, usually the verdicts come in within an hour. And off they go. I could tell you stories about her horses in Virginia, about being stopped by the governor, getting involved, Governor Rockefeller, all this stuff. Now,
I had another question.
Yes, I'll be short.
Just a little bit more. I wanted to go back in terms of your ancestry.
Oh, okay. My mother's ancestry is here the longest. Sheridan, okay? In 1760, a Sheridan came over, and I used to tell the other Irishmen that Irish were here before yours knew there was a boat to escape on. And he fought in the Revolution, and he was given Loyalist land as a reward after the war. However, being a Catholic and not being part of the Protestant majority, he couldn't get title to the land. So when he wanted to borrow money, they wouldn't, because they couldn't foreclose on it if he didn't pay them back, the banks or the person who loaned him the money. So he lost the land. So he and some others went to see George Washington when New York was the capital of the colony, the colonial land. And George Washington interfered with the colonial governors, who were Dutchmen. And they passed the New York State Bill of Rights in 1791, saying everyone could go own land. Now, I had another relative who owned land from Peter Stuyvesant, Van Ben Schoten, Jewish, Sephardic Jew. And his family, like the Sheridans, the two Sheridan brothers never got married. All the other Sheridans were sisters. And this man had all daughters. And he was famous for selling the Russian bonds to the Trans-Siberian Railroad. And he had a bank in Kiev, Russia. Okay? And I guess, like the Kaiser said, he was the Tsar's Jew, the assimilated Jew. Yeah, you have to face it. That's history. And when he died in 1910, the Tsar sent his body and his family back on a Russian warship to New York City. And when we went up to the grave site, my mother said, I have to go up there one more time. I haven't been there in 30 years since the last burial. We went up to the Jewish cemetery in the Bronx. We got off the elevator line. This Jewish theological student came up, and we asked him to say the prayer. So we went in to this sarcophagus. He and his wife are buried above the ground, but on dirt. And on the foot was a relief of the Tsar and Tsarina, which is the only face I think you ever see in a Jewish cemetery. They had lamps that were lighted by torchlight. They had a little stove there to keep us warm, and the fellow darvished and all. And he said, "Do you want any more?" I said, "No." My mother was saying a rosary, but so when I got up, I think I gave the kid $10. I said, "This is for you." And he looked at it, and I said, "Gee, maybe it wasn't enough." It was like, people didn't give money. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So we went home. But that was that story. Now, the Sheridans went on, and we believe it was his son, Philip Sheridan, General Philip Sheridan, who in his biography, which I have hand-signed, said he never said the only good Indian was a dead Indian. But he is known to have to walk out of a church when Indians came in, because he did consider them savage. Another story, we'll leave that be. He's probably the most famous in the family. My father's side came here in 1815 through Canada. We found a name in Ohio. And my father's height to fame came about in the 1920s. He came to New York. He had a garage. The Mercedes-Benz people came to him to ask him to be an official repair center. And they put a salesman in there with booklets you bought in, and he built the car for you. They didn't have them ready built. And one day, Orny Madden, one of the Irish gangsters, all the gangsters in New York were Irish before the Mafia, since the Civil War. He came in, and the garage is made as a car parking garage. It had an oval structure, and the cars went up on the ramp, and they were parked against it. Now, the columns that held up the oval were perfect for putting a vat in for making beer. So my father made the best beer in New York. It's called King's Beer. You can look it up, Orny Madden. He had a fight with Dutch Schultz over broken beer barrels. Dutch Schultz would have killed him if Orny Madden hadn't come in. When Orny Madden left his wife, my mother went to him and he said, "Peggy, I'm going to take care of my daughters and my wife." He went down to Arkansas, married the sheriff's daughter, and opened 2 gambling joints and died in his bed, one of the few. So once a month they would come by and they would break one part when the vat had been empty of beer. The money was in beer. Liquor, my father, steam car mechanic, used to get the old steam kettles and go to the various speakeasies and put them in. And they couldn't get you. You were arrested for transporting alcohol, not necessarily for selling it. So 150 proof, he had a college professor. Bourbon, they called American, was clear. Rye had so much caramel. Scotch had twice as much caramel. That's what you got. No other liquor, that was it. They owned the Cotton Club, the famous Cotton Club. Mm-hmm. My father would go up with his custom-built Chrysler Imperial Roadster, who he bought with Jack Dempsey the same day, became great friends. He used to eat at Dempsey's for nothing. They would move the fire plug away so my father could park his car right in front. And my mother would leave her fur coat in the open car, and they would have all these fighters walking up and down watching the cars. And they would go in, and the only white band leader who played there was Paul Whiteman. All the Cab Calloway, Duke Ellington. And my mother has pictures of all of them, including the actress Stormy Weather. I just can't. And my mother had to see the movie when it came out. So I put double dighties on. They took her to the movies. We go into the theater. She said, "Why is all the smoke here?" I'm saying, "Everyone's smoking pot." I'm getting a little high. She's getting a little high. And then in the middle of the picture, She said, oh my God. I said, what? I said, oh God, she may be 30. She said, they never sat down with us. Oh, Jesus. And, half time I go, oh. So it was over with. She was shocked with some of the scenes. The officer and the gentleman, any movie she wanted to see, I got on videotape. She was shocked with the sex scenes. Oh, what's going on here? So be that as it may, that was the story. My father had an apartment on West 64th Street where I had him out here. We made friends and all. I'll tell you a story about legends. Wherever you looked at, these three black fellas and me. And when Diane came out, the hostess, I said, this is Bill Willett, chief clerk of the executive officer of the Supreme Court. Mm-hmm. This is Judge Jonathan Sander, that was the name, John Sander. He helped defend one of the Scottsboro boys and worked with Thurgood Marshall on the Supreme Court case. I said, he's a Supreme Court judge, head of the lowest civil court. This is Judge Dudley, Edwin Dudley, head of the Supreme Court, civil branch, and our former ambassador to Liberia, appointed by President Kennedy. Everyone who was in sober, I just went back to eating like they're all right and all. And she took a picture and put it up there. Then when I brought Whoopi Goldberg, I'm buying tires, she walks in. So I took her to lunch there. We had a picture. I took it down. She was a nice lady, I really. And, these crazy stories, the one on here in my life, the Players Club, the people I met there, the English actor married to Vivian Lee, if you remember his name. He was married to Vivian Lee. I can't say it's Sir now.
Laurence Olivier.
He came down, sat at our table. Gregory Peck. They showed a film, and they had Fuchs there, and his daughter died in the courthouse. I said, where do I know you from? I said, a place we don't want to talk about. Let's see, it's a bad time in your life. I said, the courthouse. Oh, okay. And he had a thing with Frank Sinatra and whatnot. Then he showed a film in which Paul Whiteman rides in a horse on the stage play. And afterwards I said, I got to tell you something. My father bought that horse and that saddle for Paul Whiteman, and that saddle used to be in Kaufman's. And if anyone went there, now some of them, they all played before, remembers Pop Kaufman putting you on that horse and seeing Buster Crabbe there, if you remember Buster Crabbe, Flash Gordon. Mm-hmm. It was something to see. And oh, how nice. And then they had something else there. I went with my friend. I had a top hat, a cutaway coat, bow tie, and in a bag, a sled. And when I took the sled out, it said Rosebud. And I had to get on the stage and explain, oh, my name is Mr. Kane. And I sang the Kane with the, and I showed I won the champagne. And Christopher Plummer had to give it to me. Then I had Gregory Peck and my lady friend who belonged to the club, paying the $2,000 a year dues. She wrote a poem, and they showed it to John. I always say Mariscalco, like the cherries, the maraschino or something. And he said, you have to read it. So I get on the stage, and my mother always said I had to listen to CBS radio and speak properly. You enunciate properly. That's how I became also the crier in the court. So anyway, I read the poem. It had all of his pictures in it. Beautiful poetry, great pentameter, syllables. And it ended with, what the heck, we'll always have Gregory Peck. They went wild. 300 tickets we sold at $50 a ticket. They made money for the year extra. Gregory Peck comes over, grabs me, hugs me, comes over the table, and I tell him, I didn't write it. This lady wrote it. Sat down with her, spoke with her. A month later, she calls me up. He sent a picture from his house with that poem on the wall, a big picture with him and his wife next to him, and another picture the same size with his dirty knees in his garden with flowers behind him. People, she had things of Kirk Douglas. Oh, the ones. We have a letter written down there from Laurence Olivier saying how much it was as good as when they gave me the Honorary Academy Award, if you ever saw that. And John Voight cried. It was so good. The courtesy showed me in New York City, known for his cold demeanor, was so great. I felt, Then, to give you what actors, the Burwood Inn in Flushing was next to my grandparents' house. My mother would go over, and Charlotte Greenwood, the famous actress who danced in a lot of plays, Tangerine and Oklahoma, the movie and the play, ran it with a Mrs. Berman. On Christmas Eve one night, we were all over there. My father, I wasn't born yet. My father, my mother, she, Mrs. Berman, and who walks in but Barbara Stanwyck and her husband. Barbara Stanwyck was known to have a foul mouth. And there was another man there, an old actor called Cyril Chadwick. And he played in movies at the Paramount Studio, and anyone who stayed there came over to Burwood Inn. And, Neil Hamilton, Dolores Del Rio, Cedric Gibbons, who won the most Academy Awards for set decoration. Thomas Meehan lived there, an old vaudevillian, an old actor from Silent on his last days. And there's a piano up there, and I showed the man who runs it now as a restaurant how all the names were. They all died in that order. That was used in the movie too. And Cyril Chadwick said we were all going to midnight mass, not Charlotte Greenwood. She was a Jehovah's Witness or something. He said how, as a poor boy in London, being Jewish, he had no shoes. He said he loved to go to the masses and listen to the music, because in Jewish ceremony there's no music, it's all chanting. And he said the people would come out, and when they would come out, they'd see me sitting on the steps, poorly dressed, he said sometimes shivering, and they would give me a penny. Mm-hmm. He said this went on every Sunday, and he said I had enough money to go home and buy a big chicken or turkey for my parents, or a piece of roast beef. And he said I always remember that. And with that, Larry Fay, married to Barbara Stanwyck, who was a vaudevillian, who hated all the owners of theaters because they happened to be Jewish, said an offensive anti-Semitic remark to Mr. Chadwick. Well, Mrs. Burnham is shocked. The actress said to her, Frank, we don't speak this way. This was told to me by my mother, 20 years later. You get up and leave, and take your foul-mouthed wife with you, meaning Barbara Stanwyck, and don't bother ever coming back. So he left in a huff and a puff. And who walks in but John Barrymore? This is where it really gets hard. And he says hello to everyone. He says, we have to get to the CBS studio. My brother can't read the night before Christmas. He's too sick. I have to do it. So he takes a whole a glass of booze, and he says, but I need a ride. My father, I'll get you there. So to get my father's custom-built Chrysler, he insists he sits in the rumble seat. My mother no heater in those days. And they get to the CBS studio about 5 minutes before the broadcast, and they stop the car. My father looks back, and the rumble seat closed, and there's no John Barrymore. He said, holy shit to himself. I thought he fell out. With that, he gets out, opens the rumble seat, and John Barrymore stands up and throws his cape over his shoulder and takes his hat off and bows to the audience that's waiting outside. Now, to get out of this car, you had to step on the fender and a step on the bumper. He did it perfectly. He insisted my parents come in. He read, it was a thing where if he went overtime, they just kept it going. There was no set time limit. He read it perfectly to the stage clues where, post toasties would say, we are not giving an advertisement because of this broadcast. And he read right through it. Then with that, he went back to the Player Club. In those days, you stayed there. And I told John Maraschino, whatever, I know he thought that was so good. So every time I went in with her, he'd come over, and everyone in the club would look over at us like, we were somebody special. And she dressed with her diamonds, and I always dressed with I dressed better than the judges. So with that, the stories that went on. Ephraim Zimbalist Jr., he comes in. You remember him from the FBI and 77 Sunset Strip. Very fair skin. He told me, I had to take this for television. I said, well, I have some news for you. Your parents lived in Cleveland. I said, yes. Your father was in the symphony orchestra, and they lived next door to my paternal grandparents. And when my Aunt Alma was born, your mother was one of the godmothers in the Serbo-Croatian church, even though we're Roman Catholics. But we found out there was no Roman Catholic church, and that was the closest. My grandfather and grandmother are still buried in a Serbo-Croatian cemetery there in Cleveland. And they said, well, that's smart. That's really nice knowing, you know. So I showed him some stuff when they had a house on Shelter Island. I got off, and he took it politely. And afterwards, he got up to speak, and he said, I want to thank one of those. And he said, I met J. Edgar Hoover, and he spoke to me for 3 hours, and he never repeated himself once. He spoke perfectly. He never lost his trend of thought. And this idea he walked around in a dress is ridiculous. And he said, I believe there is a supreme being. I'm a religious man, and I get on that 7 program, you know, that it's on one of the religious channels. Whenever you watch it, there's a 7 in it. And he always, you know, says something about that. And, you know, someone gets on from the Catholic actors and all that stuff. So then that's, you know, the story of things that happened in my life. In the courthouse, I had an attorney, Anderson, who's dead now, from Bill Shea's office, Shea, Gould, Clemento, and Casey, insult me. As a member of the planning board in Corona Elmhurst, I made a speech about changing the name of Shea Stadium from that politician lawyer to Corona Veterans Stadium for all the kids of Italian extraction who died at Anzio. Well, the place, you know, I'll tell you something else about being carried out of Brooklyn. So with that, Bill Shea calls up, and Judge Rubin said, oh, Mr. Shea, he didn't have a suit on. I wouldn't speak to a lawyer if he didn't have a suit. And he comes in, he says, oh, sir, Your Honor, and we're having conferences, so there was at least 50 lawyers in the courtroom. He says, I'll tell you about the parties I threw on Friday afternoons. So so he thought I was a clerk. I was a court officer at the time. He said, I want to apologize to Miss Ann. That wasn't proper. I apologize. I accept your apology, but I want you to know my brother, who gives you $25,000 a year on retainer, is changing it. You get the money. You know, he looks around, everyone's, and Judge Israel Rubin is holding the papers up like this. Oh, Jesus, get him out of here. With that, he puts his hand out, and I just look at him. He said, aren't you going to shake my hand? I said, no, I'm not. And he says, we're from the same background. State. I said, oh, no, you're wrong. I said, my Irish were in this country before yours knew there was a boat you could escape on. And if it weren't for my Irish, yours couldn't come. And if it were up for me, I'd send the whole hungry bunch of you back. And he goes storming out. Judge Rubin looks at me, oh, what did you have to say that? And he goes storming out, and he goes, with double doors. And I always kept one locked. And he hits the one that was locked. And he opens the other, and he goes out. And with that, the lawyers are looking, the judges looking, they're all looking at me. And Barry McTiernan, who I had an argument with Judge Comerford over the Irish Day Parade, telling him, you're from Ireland, go back to Ireland and run the parade. He gets up and he starts applauding. And they all applaud me. I get these applause throughout my life. But the best was when I went to Brooklyn, when a court officer was involved in a kid who wanted to buy a car, and he was killed. He ran away, and he ran across the Belt Parkway. And this court officer remembers hitting someone, but the kid hit him and bounced off. So then he went back and all, and they had together, and this priest ran a parade. So we have this meeting, and I walk in, and I say, look, I'm the president of the biggest civic association in Queens. May I say something? And I had my herringbone velvet collar with my black power. They look, oh, yes, certainly. So they announced me. I got up, and I said, where is so-and-so? Where is such and such? Where are they? Why aren't they here? I said, I came down Empire Boulevard, which is now in a red convertible, fearful if I broke down, they'd kill me maybe for the car or for what's in my pocket. I said, but as soon as I got to Canarsie, I know if I had a problem, people would come over and give me a hand. And we were like, yeah, we're going to do that. I said, I think I made mention, I'm not even Italian, but I have 3 Italian uncles. And they all started saying. So anyway, I said, I don't know what more to say, but you tell these politicians and you tell the mayor, New York City begins in Canarsie. And with that, they left, and they're carrying me. And I got in the Brooklyn paper. I know, the Ridgewood Times. This is all I need. I got rid of a precinct commander. I gave Klutz Kelly our Public Be Damned award. I was going to put him on a billboard. I did a lot of it. I had a police sergeant arrest his own mother. That was a good one. Oh, was he angry? I pinned it on his door. They laughed at the precinct. Then I went to the Warren Squad at 32 Duane Street with the Post number 6, page 6 editor. Introduced them, told them the story. They all took, they're all fat belly. And I always leave why are cops so fat and firefighters aren't? You know why? I wrote an article. Because if they have a heart condition, they can retire at 3/4 of their salary tax-free. More than half the cops in New York City are on 3/4 tax-free pensions. And when they die, guess what? The wife gets a good percentage of that if she survives. What can I say? So that's my height to fame. I think of some of the other crazy things I got involved in a St. Patrick's Day parade. I finally said, why are you asking all these people off the boat? My people have been here for 7 generations. They were here before these people ever knew of America. And it got on television. Usually there's a 30-second clip just in case. Yes, sir. Yes, sir. And my parish used to be the first parish that marched in the St. Patrick's Day parade because it was the richest parish in the diocese. It still is. I got the Catholic Church $500,000 for my parish, St. Bartholomew's in Elmhurst, by renting the new school and the floor in the old school, and I'm trying to turn the entry convent into a charter school. Of course, the union, teachers union, has things sewn up. And that's where, after 40 years being on the planning board, I retired. I lived in Elmhurst all my life, the oldest permanent settlement in Queens. I had Ronald Reagan come to speak on Queens Boulevard with George Bush, which is very unusual. They don't like two of them traveling together, for bomb throwers. And after the speech, I remember he turning one this way, and I could see where his neck ended. It was all white below it. He had makeup on. He had to use the bathroom. And he says, I got to use the bathroom. I figured, the limousine would have a toilet or something. It didn't. So he either had to cross Queens Boulevard, 10 lanes of traffic, go to McDonald's, or come to my house. So where do you think he came to my house? All the neighbors are looking. And as I walked into the house, my mother's there with the nurse, and she goes, Oh, I saw you on television. Oh, I used to see you in the movies. Oh, he said, oh, yeah, hi. And I said, don't worry, she's voting for you. So when I did my bathroom over, I took the toilet and I put it under my porch. If anyone comes, I can show them the toilet he used. So be that as it may, that's another heart. I almost kept it, but it looked so bad. It was an old-fashioned toilet from the 40s. I still had those little white things all over the floor like I had under the stove.
But did you grew up in Elmhurst?
I grew up in Elmhurst. I went to St. Bartholomew's Grammar School. I went to the scholarship Bishop Lachlan Memorial High School in Brooklyn. I went to St. John's University for 2.5 years. And I never finished my college education. And I would probably have to say I did very good in the courts as such. I stayed in the family court. I broke in 2 other men. They may have put me as chief clerk in the Queens family court. I wouldn't have made any more money. I had a lot more problems. There's some other interesting things I did. The court. Now, if they want to take you in on 939 of the mental hygiene law, the judge will have a fact-finding special proceeding, not an action, with petitioner and respondent. The respondent's a doctor, in which by clear and convincing evidence it has to be shown to this judge that you're a danger to yourself or someone else, or both. He can retain you. You can ask to be released, and I get a private psychiatrist, and I pay him $75 an hour back then, to give you more time to look at your record, and he'll give a testimony, and only by clear and convincing evidence the judge can release this person. as not being gay. Then we had the third type of trial, taking injected medicine. If you take it by the mouth, there's no trouble. But if you touch their body, you have to get a court order. And they have to show, by a fair preponderance of the evidence, that this has to be done. I had a kid, about 30 years old, graduate from Yale, worked for Young and Rubicon, won a Clio commercial award. Flipped out. He took drugs and he drank at the same time, which gives you organic brain disorder. And one time they're making a presentation at Young and Rubicon with him there, and the company's president says, "I don't like that." And the kid jumps up on the table and starts yelling at the guy. Then I had another one. He was the chief Mercedes-Benz transmission repairman on East 37th Street, where they have the big Mercedes. He's the stalker of Katie Tong. Good-looking young man. He didn't have trouble getting girlfriends. You'd see him, you'd look at him. And he would go where her house was, go to the studio, finally, going demanding to see her because she wanted to see him one time. "I don't want to see this guy. What the hell? Don't you love me?" That stuff. So with that, I have Judge Ascioni there. The kid's Italian. And the kid says, "Well, I think I got the evil eye." Judge said, "I believe in the evil eye. You can go back, you live with your parents, and you go back." Yeah. So, and he says, "If I let you go, what are you going to do?" "I'm going to go back and live with my parents." He said, "What's the first thing you're going to do?" Figuring you'll go back to work, because they said they'd take him back. "Oh, I'm going to go over and see Katie Tong. She's waiting for me." The judge looks at me. Then I have another judge. He lets a guy go who has a boyfriend. I'll leave it at that. I said, "I don't." The next day we're going to the next hospital and we hear this judge let this guy go who went home, killed his boyfriend, crucified him on the wall, emasculated him, and called the cops. The judge got out of the car and threw up. I had another judge, she wanted to see the leg we had to be taken off. Half the time the hospital took it off and the lawyer would say, "No, you got to get permission." And go ahead, the people were drunk at some. So Judge Edith Miller said, I'll never forget this, "I want to see it." So they bring the guy out in the wheelchair, and the leg, the smell, they cut it open, and it was so bad, she fainted, and I threw up all the breakfast, because we always had breakfast when we went to I didn't know, what more could go wrong? So from that time on, I told every judge, so they never wanted to, don't open anything, don't, is he, no, he's on the, then the electroshock treatments, the difference. I had one at New York Hospital, this psychiatrist, and his brother was a judge. The brother couldn't go to the cases he was a psychiatrist on, and he was on all of them. Oh, what we went through. What do we do now? I said, we do whatever we want. What was it? It was the crazy hat. There was some other thing in unsafe buildings. I got involved in that.
Because there was a period.
Yeah, we had hearings for the first AIDS. Now, the judge, they went into St. Patrick's and took the communion and threw it on the floor and almost caused a riot. They were in our courthouse because Roy Cohn's law firm and William Buckley's, Bozell, his cousin, his brother-in-law, came in, saw me. I said, "Look, keep it a criminal offense. 298, we can put him away." No, we want it civil. They arrested, they're brought to the civil court, and Judge Preminger, woman judge, related to Otto Preminger, became the surrogate. She's there and she fines them 3 cents each. So she's on the front porch making a show of it with her wig askew, and they're all lined up with a hand out. And I got Kenny from the Post, and he took a picture and put it on the second page of the New York Post the next day. Then I had a doctor who was arrested for urinating on the sidewalk. He gives me a hard time. I give him all the papers. I said, "I didn't do that. Don't take it out on me." I used to tell the young lawyers, "Don't take it out on me because you didn't make it to medical school." And thank God you didn't. I could only imagine. I used to tell them, "What more do you need? You need knowledge, wisdom, understanding, courage, fortitude, piety with this clerk, and fear of the judge I'm sending you to." They all. So he wanted a free lawyer. Judge refused him. He's a doctor. He's earning money. He can afford a lawyer. comes to me, gives me a hard time. The chief clerk gives me a sign. I'm telling him I cannot take him up to the lawyer. He has to he demands I get the papers. So before he got the papers, I got the guy from the post to come down and look at the papers and what was going on. The guy, he has a Spanish name. I try to remember the Latino names. They're lovely names, like Italian names. So calls me up. I said, I want you to take a photo showing Mount Sinai Hospital sign and two doctors with their back to you urinating against the hospital wall with a puddle saying, wait till you see what I'm going to do to my patients someday. Guy says, that's great. They run it in the post. The guy's furious. The doctor's furious. And I'm there at my desk. I want to see you. I said, do you have an appointment? He went up to see John. I said, cut the crap, John. Maybe you had your job too long. I said, my uncle. Now I'd have the Post, the Daily News. What's left? The Catholic paper? So he just walked out. He paid the $50 fine. Then I had a doctor who gave testimony, and the lawyer who hired him was supposed to pay his fee. The lawyer didn't. He said, get it from the patient. He said, wait a minute, you called me the patient. So he goes to the civil court, small claims. They throw it out. He appeals it to the appellate tribunal. And I said, look, they're probably not going to give it to you. But make the speech about, is he jealous at you because you made it to medical school, he didn't? And they said, let them know, and when you do it, turn around to the judges and say, from now on, any lawyer who hires a doctor will pay that doctor before the doctor gets into court. That was it. I don't know what the outcome was, but it was like maybe $250. Because he was there all day. I mean, come on. We have Dr. Kaufman. He gets $3,000 in the morning and $3,000 in the afternoon, neurologist. 25 years ago, they paid $150,000 a year in malpractice insurance. The average lawyer pays $50,000. So $1,000 a week of his fees have to cover insurance. Medicare pays more money if you're a doctor in Manhattan than if you're a doctor in Queens, because your expenses are higher for rent. And they had me in, they had me in on the medical malpractice panel. So the doctor said, what we're going to do. I said, here's what you're going to do. I'll repeat myself once. You go to New Hampshire, you open an office, you do your operations in New Hampshire, even if you have to build a hospital, because they have a threshold. If you kill a patient, you can't get more than $100,000. I said, if the people need the operation, let them go up there and get it. That's where your operations are. You do that, you'll have no trouble. And the patient won't have to pay as much to cover the insurance premium. Well, they look at one another. Judges are there like, this guy has something. Lawyers are there. Then I had to get more lawyers to review the malpractice cases that come in to see if they had value. Like Yul Brynner came in. He went to the Hawaii Kai under the Plaza Hotel, and he was eating something. He broke a cap. Well, he had to have it done special, so he's suing for lawyers' fees and the broken cap. And the people from the Hawaii Kai are only too happy. They're getting all this publicity. He's getting all this publicity. So I said to him, you're a fine gentleman, and I respect you, but isn't this for publicity? He looks at me, like, what can I say? So they settled the case. My brother used to take me there, but you know what it was? I wore good clothes. They fitted. They put cushions out, and some nut came out chopping stuff up, throwing it in the air on fire, and you sat on these cushions, and it was uncomfortable. When you went into the Plaza Oak Room in the middle of the week, after 6 p.m., you wore a tuxedo, or they didn't let you in.
No.
That's not that way today. You can come in like this to the best hotel, and they sit you in the dining room.
It's not the same standard.
No, the standard is gone. I went to 4 good restaurants. They all closed. I went to one. The guy was saying, look, I'm going to throw the meat away. Do you want a couple of steaks? He said he was paying $30,000 a month for rent. He hired 2 bartenders, 2 chefs, 3 or 4 waitresses, and plus busboys.
Mm-hmm.
And he said they're all out of work. Who the hell's going to hire them? We're closing restaurants left to right. They said 50% of the restaurants closed in Manhattan over COVID. Louis Rossman on YouTube will show you below 50th Street on 6th, 7th, and 8th Avenue the number of storefronts that have closed before COVID and after COVID. Banks, restaurants, supermarkets, bodegas, cleaning establishments, bakeries, storefront, corner, banks really that have closed and not coming back. He interviewed a woman in the 7th Avenue Co-op, very rich, big, 2-bedroom and more apartment. What do you do for shopping with the supermarket closed? She said, oh, no problem. I just call in for the food. They have these, they come in with the food. And it's pretty good food. I have a friend who does, the meals are not that expensive. And they're tasty. And they have a bread that I don't know what the hell it's made of. It doesn't taste that bad, but it fills you up. And they insist you eat it along with the meal. So the portion isn't as big. Mm-hmm. They even, if you insist on it, will give you like a midnight snack. Mm. Like I've been ruined from cruise ships. I eat early, then I have the midnight snack, which, I usually eat fruit, a banana, strawberries, whatever else they have there. I always have them leave peanuts in my room. And when you go on a cruise, you bring your bottled water, because they charge you like $3.75 for it. And you don't drink what comes out of the faucet.
No.
That's seawater that's retreated.
Yeah.
They do have regular water, but they don't want to pay the $2,000 fee when they hook into the New York City water to fill the tanks in the ships. Mm. They want to start $2,000. So when you sit down, you always ask for iced tea, a large glass of iced tea. And don't do on the French ships, they used to bring out lunchtime and dinner time, and in the evening, a carafe of red and a carafe of white wine. Leave it on the table. Help yourself. And the word I found out, everyone questions it, and I said, I'm sure I'm not the only one. You order the main course of the meal, and they bring you out the potato. Beautiful. If it's a mashed potato, it looks like that mountain in, the third something of the kind, and with all sorts. And then they bring you out the vegetable. Then they bring you out the meat. And when people ask, they say, "Oh, we can't bring you it all at the same time. Things will get cold." No one finishes but usually they finish the meat because they bring you bread with a grill. So that's kind of the Italian ships. So, you want spaghetti? So I said, yeah. They bring out a tub of spaghetti at the size of this room. And they've all pot. What kind of clam sauce? Mm-hmm. The guy, 20 different ones. Then he brings over the spaghetti, and it's enough you would put out for 4 people. And then he ladles the stuff on. But what they would do if you ordered anything, on the English ships, you want a glass of water, they have it on it with like a little napkin, mm-hmm. and they serve it to you, and they have a glove on, and and put. Now the big thing is they don't like to have sit in the dining room. They have it for a hot meal, mm-hmm. but you can go up on deck and have your chicken, a turkey sandwich, roast beef. They're not cutting all the time. So I usually say, look, I want a hot roast beef sandwich with mashed potatoes. They only seem to have mashed potatoes at lunchtime. Mm-hmm. There's scalloped potatoes, this potato, baked potatoes, spoiled potatoes, roasted potatoes at dinner, but they never have mashed potatoes. Hmm. My mother almost had, being of an Irish extraction, eating plainly but good, we always had potatoes, except on Thursday when we had spaghetti. And we always had ranzoni because it was made in Queens. We have to take care of those people. And somebody other works for them, want him to keep his job. I met Barbara Walters when she was nothing. My friend was the delegate for 802. Mm. And we go there, pull up in his car. I'd go out. I always wore black, so we'd sit down. And Lou Walters at the Latin Quarter, where this man was the band leader for 20 years, that he let go with 2 weeks' notice. No? what do you want to eat? So we always had a club sandwich. You went there, it was after dinner, no one wanted a big dinner, and the food was probably not that good. And she's there, and she had the wet foot, I couldn't understand what the hell she was saying. That's why they called her Baba Wawa. She looked nice and all, but I mean, she must have been about 18 or 19, and now I think she's 80 if she just died. She's older than me even. But that was that. Top of the Sixes, the Persian Room, the Roosevelt Grill, the Pennsylvania. Met all the band leaders there. Guy Lombardo, Pennsylvania Six. In fact, because I met him, he made a Christmas album and he used my quarter from my past, from my church. He had like a 60-piece band. Top of the Sixes, my neighbor played there, Lou somebody. He had the house behind us. Trying to think. Mogambo is now a private club. And Roy Cohn, when he was alive, used to have his Christmas party there. Now the people, Rosenthal, the DA, who tried to convict him 3 times and lost, Mayor Beam, you name them, all the politicians were there, Roy Cohn and all. And Roy Cohn would always say hello to me. I had trouble with somebody. And I thought he had his lawyer there. He said, look, why don't you just speak to my lawyer? And they gave him Roy Cohn's card. When he looked at it, I just smiled. I said, you want a field day? I'll give you a... So, they were cutting. And anytime they had these parties in the court, they bring, or the movies, they bring in food like it was nothing. And I'll tell you about the woman vice president who ran for vice president. I knew her from Italian charities. When my father got the building for the Italians, got Generoso Popi to pay for it and build it, with 2 Italian Jews who owned it as a used car lot. A long story there. They made me one of the trustees at the building. So in my office, I put a full-size picture of Mussolini. And every time somebody did something wrong, I took my riding crop and I hit my desk. And I said, if he had to depend on you, the trains would have never run on time. And I would say it loud enough so everyone could hear. So anyway, wherever the hell we were. But Mogambo, so I was noticing all these caterers, all the guys who come in, have beautiful hair, They're really, attractive men. And, gee, look at that guy's handsome, the girls would say. Then I see them run over to each other and they kiss each other. I realized they were all politely gay. And same at, my girlfriend sold shoes and I went to see her at Bergwood Goodmill, one of the big stores. And I saw the guys. She said, oh no, we only hire gay guys because they won't make any move on the women. And I said, well, that makes sense. What am I to say? Then there was one interesting thing I thought you might find interesting. Do you remember the actor, and here goes my name, Tab Hunter? In the 50s, he was big, good-looking man. I remember seeing him in Battle Cry. He comes onto the beach, he's walking up, in a bathing suit, and as he walked out of the water, every girl in the movie theater went, oh! And everyone was laughing. Comes to the Players Club. He said, I've come here for my new book in which I admit I'm gay. I have a lifetime partner. We're not married or anything, but we live together. And he said, there was a suit with the old Confidential magazine in which they lied about Maureen O'Hara. And all these lawyers brought in cases, including my case where they say I was at a party in Rock Hudson about gay. So he's there with Jack Warner. And Jack Warner, this is his big star. He loses him. He used to rent him out for more money than he was paying him, for the 40 weeks, or, 10 weeks. So anyway, they finally settled the case before they call Tab Hunter to the stand. He couldn't lie. They had pictures. This would have been it. So Maureen O'Hara was they made big things. So he says, Jack Warner turns to me and he said, kid, remember, tomorrow's news is today's garbage. Or yesterday's news is today's garbage. Today's news is tomorrow's garbage. Let's go. And he said he saved my career. And then he said I took out every starlet. Movie studios would call up, pay for everything, the limousine and everything, if I would go out with one of their starlets. And he said, I'm sorry, I'm the way I am. And he said, his brother was killed in Vietnam. He was at a horse show, jumping a horse, and a guy came up. He had a name you couldn't pronounce. And he jumped, and he left, and he went home. The brother had 6 children, was a lifetime career Navy man. So they named a base after him. So what he did, he said, when the movies dried up, I worked in the theater. I worked the ice show because I was great on roller skates. And he said, I put all 6 kids, even though they had pensions, through college. I paid for it. And I saw to it they all had a car and whatnot. He said, I didn't have much. He said, Jack Warner sent me and my partner to Europe one year. And it was like after my... And I said, gee, you're really getting something out of me besides more money when someone else using me. He said, kid, go to your hotel. I got a present for you. So he said, I go to the hotel, thinking maybe he sent me a watch. And the guy gives me a pair of cards. He says, it's a pair of keys. He gave me a Mercedes-Benz convertible. And he said, the problem was getting this car back to the United States. Do you remember the man who owned tanks out here, the tank museum?
No.
Well, he used to start them up and the shingles would come off the house roofs. So they gave him a hard time, and they found out in the town code that the manufacturing plant he had couldn't be used for a museum. So he went to Russia and he showed pictures at their war museum. They were so impressed, they gave him a T-34 tank. That cost him $38,000 to ship back to America. So I think he has one of the only T-34 tanks. But I'll leave you with another story in my lifetime of history. I go down to the Intrepid Museum on the west side of Manhattan, and we're getting a gift of a MiG jet from Russia. I go there, I look over, and I see this guy in a Russian uniform. And he says, how do you do? I'm Colonel so-and-so. And he's speaking like I am. And he must have thought I was dressed nicely. I must have been someone of importance. He introduced me to General so-and-so. And he introduces me to Marshal so-and-so. And they're all there with their, medals. How they stood up, I don't know. They all had medals over their chest. And they're talking. And he has a hat, the colonel, and the marshal has a hat bigger. It looked like a sombrero. The bigger you are, the bigger the hat is. So he's talking to me, translating, and he says, he's a aficionado of General Robert E. Lee. I said, would he like to see Robert E. Lee's uniforms? Would you like to see where he served at the fort right here? And, oh, yes. So we having food. We walk out. I have my Pontiac convertible. I put the top down because I put the fattest guy in the front. No, I put the colonel in. No, he sat in the back. I put the field marshal in the front. And as they were going over the Brooklyn Bridge, they put the straps on so the hats would fly off. We get there. I pull up to the barracks, and the guy in white with the white salutes me, and he looks at them. And I said, I have a weapon. They don't. I will go into the guard, and I will turn the weapon in, which I did do. And then I said, we're going to the museum. Maybe you telefy we have a field marshal, a marshal, and a colonel. I will. So we go over to the museum. Within 20 minutes, there's nobody. Oh, no, as we're driving by in the car, there are men marching, and we look over. I honk my horn. We look over, and they all salute. And, oh my God. So we go in, we walk in, and it's a museum. So I show him the case. That's a uniform he wore before the Mexican War, like in 1846. And I went over, I said to him, here's $50. Get me all the toy cannons and any dolls that fit and put them in a bag. So with that, this colonel comes over who's like in charge of the place, and he takes us over for dinner. Now, we used to go from the courthouse, get ready for this, in a Navy bus at lunchtime to Fort, I mentioned, under the bridge, and have lunch and get back in time. And lunch was like $2. We had roast, we had great lunches, but the time was you had to be ready for the bus. If the bus left, it's over with. So, but we had it good. We tipped the waiters. And anyway, they're there. So with that, they're thankful. I get him back in my car, and I have to drive him up to 125th Street, where they have like a 20-story building. I pull up to the building. The two guards in Russian Army uniforms now come out, and the car rolls back like in The Godfather, and I pull in, and I go around this horseshoe, and another car follows me around. And I park, I get out, they thank me, I give the bell. A month later, I get this letter, with stamps on it, at my house in Elmhurst. The letter carrier rang the doorbell to show me what I got. So I opened it up, and it's beautiful. I thank my grand, the pictures and all. So I felt good about that, good Russian. I figured maybe he would come over with Gorbachev and remember me. But it was one of those things.
Just, could you say briefly how you came out here?
I drove out. I had a house in Southampton. I owned a third of it. I gave it to my cousins, who was at 8 bedrooms. Someone was always in my bedroom, I slept in the couch. I gave it away, and I came out to see Tina Fredericks, the big real estate person. I came out earlier, like April or May. It was a very hot day. My air conditioning didn't work in my black Cadillac. I came out, and on 27, as has always been on 27, a traffic tie-up. I can remember when we were going to get a big, like the North Road here, and we fought against it because of too much traffic. So I turned around and came to the north. I came, I guess, all the way to Southold. I saw a real estate office. I went in. I cannot remember the sales lady's name. He sat down with me, and before we got finished, her husband went to school with my brother in the Catholic school, St. Bartholomew's in Elmhurst. Then she told me about New Suffolk. We have a small school, so we have low taxes. And on the other side of the private golf course, there are homes that are in the New Suffolk School District that were especially built for the low, they okayed them some way, for senior citizens. I looked at one, it was beautiful. I could afford it, but it was so damn big. They had a lawnmower in the basement, in the garage, to cut the lawn. It was like 2 acres long. I wanted to where I could keep a horse. You need an acre of land. But anyway,
What year was that?
November of 1993.
Okay.
I came with my uncle, and I went into New Suffolk, and I saw a house that I'm in now that I bought that had a for sale sign. I called up the broker, who's out of business, thank God. He said, it's $249,000. I said, that's a bit rich for me. So thank you. Then I called the name that I'd been calling of the owner. And finally he said he was settling in the estate. So right there. I said, well, what do you want for the house? He said, well, we've been offered $169,000. So I offered him 170. No, we were offered 160. I offered him 168, 5% more. He calls me back. He said, they offered me 170. Now I'm sitting with the judges in the morning. So I said, I'll offer you 175, but that's it. I'm not getting in any more. Take it. Well, he calls me back. They offer me 170 cash. So Judge Parness is dead. And I said, so I said, I'll give you 170 cash. I got the house. No one had the keys. The next door neighbor had the keys. When I bought, I had to get the keys from her. So then the guy sent me piles of keys. So the mortgage. My lawyer who worked with me, who closed on the house, wouldn't charge me. I bought him a nice fax machine. He for some stupid reason, I should have gotten the mortgage out here. I would have saved $1,800 on points. But they get it through this bank, that bank, and the bank in Buffalo, the First National Bank of Buffalo, wants $3,600 put down. I said, what for? The house needs a paint job. I said, you stupid idiots, it's cedar. You don't paint cedar. What do you people just give bonds out? Bonds? So we settled for $1,800. I had to pay the seller's lawyer $200 to come to the closing. He so hated the seller. So I gave him the money. And when he wanted, I took my pen out, and like in, the Informer, when they pay him off, I passed it over to him. And then I tipped the guy who does the trace. He found some McKenzie out in Brooklyn who owed money, so I'm not related to him. Nor the street. There was a McKenzie who was court-martialed in the Navy who was the nephew of the Vice President of the United States. Look that up in like 1836 or something. No relation, MAC or MMC. So, be it that as it may, I came out here. You heard about the petition they took against me. My dog loves every dog but big dogs. 2 or 3 dogs come to my yard and run around with my dog every day. Other than that, I can sleep good out here. I go back to the city. I had to turn off my answer machine. Then people call me out here. Then the worst thing ever happened to me out here. And I learned something. Anyone who does any work for you, you make sure they do the work, and you get 3 appraisals. They wanted to put $9,900 for a roof. I got it for $6,100, the same roof. Another guy wanted to charge me $2,900 for a paint job, trim. I got it for $1,000 plus expenses. So you watch out. I won't mention the names, but there are 3 car places here I wouldn't trust. 2 of them, one of them, I got money back. The other one I didn't take to court, but he lost custody, lost me. And the other one I took him to court, but I didn't get it. Another one in Riverhead I took to court, I got money back. Other than that, I don't know what to say. My father had the last horse left in Elmhurst. Then he had to stable it in Bayside. There were not too many empty lots around to go with it. Then it walked into a bar one day, and we had to take it out of a bar. That made famous. My father had 700 or more people show up at his wake. The undertaker, has 3 rooms. He opened them all up for the people. That was kind of nice. We had a drive-by, and I remember there was a factory across from us that's now used by a church. And when my father came out, they came back, and, some of them blessed. It was just nice. Then we went to the... I must tell you about a burial of a judge. I'll leave you with this.
Okay.
We have the burial. I'm called up. It's a Sunday. I go over. I meet this priest there. He was the president of the St. John's Law School Alumni Association. Big man. Dies. Just elected surrogate, a big prestigious job. He was going to take me with me, but I would lose peace officer status. I said, no, I don't want to give up good. I was a court officer then. So what happened was we go to bury him, and John Lippman, who was the head of the court, so he retired for all of New York State, was his law secretary. We go to the Jewish cemetery. Everyone's lined up. And we had a rabbi. I mean, it looked like we dragged him out of bed. He may have been an alcoholic, but he gave the worst, at the graveside people. I mean, we would have thrown him in the grave and covered him up. So he kind of gets, and the 13th Psalm, now the Valley of Death. I was the only one to do it. I'm not Jewish. No one else. So he looked at me, the rabbi. Then he looks down at the grave and he says, it's not straight. Now, when they bury you, it's literally an orange crate, with holes so the dirt goes in. So calls the groundsman over, straighten out the casket. The guy takes a 2x8, lifts it up, throws it down, and breaks the end off the casket where you can see the judge's feet. I look at John Lippman. He looks at me. We both grab shovels, and we started to throw dirt down. They throw some dirt in. So, we'll take care of this. And with that, the backhoe came in, lifted the whole canvas up, and dumped all the dirt on the grave. Holy shit. When I get back, what would you guys do? I told, oh my God. So, I tell you, I had a good life. I only regret either of the 2 women I could have married. I would have a lovely family. They both, I think, probably would have had 4 kids or as many as I wanted to give them or they wanted to have. And I can say I regret nothing other than not getting married. And I could have treated my parents better. They spoiled me. I only found that out when my father died. My mother was married in 1929, and she lost 3 children, and my brother was born in 1938. My father was happy. Then she lost 1 after him. I was born She was thrilled, and she lost one after me. So my father had 2 jobs. My mother could not work. My mother would have worked throughout the Depression. She was a bookkeeper for Metropolitan Life. If I know I marry you, I have to I have to support you. People think I can't support you. So my father made a lot of money. He had a Duesenberg, which he abandoned on Queens Boulevard because when the Depression came, he didn't like Roosevelt because he got rid of the beer. But he said he was the only president who would do something. What was the other damn thing? He voted for Al Smith. What was his? I could have been better to my parents. So what I used to do when in the phone company, I would say, Dad, come and pick me up in Brooklyn and I'll take you to dinner. And you go to a diner for dinner. Then sometimes in the summer months they take them out to this movie theater. And they always had old movies. Most of them you see on television, but it's nice to see in a movie, and they liked it. And they would go into the candy store and smuggle in the candy. And years ago, my father rode his horse on Sunday, okay? All the Jewish kids whose parents owned businesses would come to my house and have breakfast in the morning. $50 pancakes, sausages, and that horrible orange juice out of a can, as well as tea. And all their parents would take care of my Mr. Kramer. I shouldn't mention names. They're all dead now. Even his son, Brucey, who grew up with me, would do my father's books. Another gentleman did the confectionery at the Waldorf Astoria, gave us cakes and stuff. Another man had my father take my mother's fur coats to his brother-in-law, who was I'd get a coat from him, bring it back, and he would line the coats, make muffs, make a wrap, make the muff thing, do the coat all around. My mother had 5 or 6 fur coats from the war. That's the only thing my father could buy with all of his money. And the hell else? Oh, I remember the nuns coming down in the 1st grade. I was sick, an abscess in the ears, and the nuns would come down on Tuesday and Thursday, 2 together, and have tea. And they would leave right away because they didn't want to be there when my father came and interfere in, some social life sitting down to dinner. You know how nuns are. Like when I would deliver things to the convent, I wasn't allowed to enter the convent. You had to stay, they had a sign up, no men are allowed. So it was a good life. I'll say one thing. Elmhurst has changed with 52 different distinct languages being spoke. But I grew up in Elmhurst when half the people spoke English and the other half spoke it with a brogue. And I would ask my mother, why do those people speak so funny? And my mother would say, they're off the boat. And I remember the former police commissioner lived around the corner, and when we go out in the summertime, my father would say, he's the police commissioner. Does he have to be in his backyard with his sleeveless undershirt on? My father wouldn't wear shorts. To him, that was like, oh, we're in Las Vegas. Frank Sinatra story. Brother, lots of money. We're in, I can't think of the place, in the, whatever it was, the big thing on the roof, the penthouse, and Frank Sinatra's on the other side. My mother's 70th birthday, we go to see Frank Sinatra, and we're sitting there. My brother loses $25,000 a year like it was nothing. He tells the owner, Cohen, a green owner. So in the middle of it, Frank Sinatra stops and he says, we have a special presentation here today. We're going to honor this woman. It's her 70th birthday. What do you say about that? I won't ask how many people are 70 years old. So he has a black fellow, Frank Wilson, I know from the Society of Singers, who anytime Frank Sinatra records, London anywhere, he has this man come over to be the pianist. And he practices beforehand with him. So he comes over, the lights are following him over, and as he gets to my table, I'm looking up. And my father and I get up, and the lights go bright on us. And he says, Peggy, it's your 70th birthday. And he kisses her, and he takes her out under the spotlight. And he says, what song would you like me to sing for you? And my mother comes up, and man, I'd like you to sing Cheery Beery Bin. Now, he hadn't sung the song since 1942 or something. So he's going, and he says, you know how it goes? And Frank Wilson waves to me. And my mother starts singing it. And he picks up the melody. And after my mother sung the line, Frank Sinatra sung the line. And it was over there. And, they had pictures taken and all coming over. And thank you. And I thanked them. But it gets better. The next day I'm coming off the elevator and I look over and I see him. And I waved to him. I said, thank you for being so kind to an old lady. He said, come over here. What's that? Oh, so I wanted to give him, I have a German army ring, all gold with a blue. I said, I want to give you this. No, I can't take a ring. No, I got plenty of rings. No. What can I do for you? I said, you made my life. I mean, a lifetime memory. I said, yeah, I did something. You had this big guy, Jilly. You always saw him in the pictures. Mm-hmm. He owned a bar on 58th Street called Jilly's. It went from 58th Street to 59th Street. I never saw it. And the bar was maybe as wide as this. You had the bar and you had people, and you couldn't do a bar, but you could sit over there across from the bar. So I said, well, could you ask Jilly to be nice to me the next time I come into this bar? What are you doing to the man? Oh, now we're with everybody. So will you be nice to him from now on? Shake his hand. So I shook hands. 2 or 3 years later, I go to see some people off on the boat. So I take 2 couples and my girlfriend. We go into Jilly's for a drink. Boom. I turn around. There's Jilly. Why did you have to say that to him? I mean, he remembered all this time. This must have really gotten him pissed off. So when we got ready to leave, we each had a couple of drinks. It was money. He wouldn't let me pay for it. So I took out a $20 bill, and the little guy who goes around, I put it in his pocket, with the little coat. Oh, you guy? I said, he works for a living. He did a good job. Thank you I appreciate it. And I patted him on the shoulder. And, people are looking like it. But he would go by, push people out of the way. As long as you didn't want to go in. But, if you got pushed to him, I guess it was a sign of honor or something. But that's it. I'll make one prognostication, and I'll call it that as a prognosticator. New York City is at its end. So many people are leaving now. Now, I had an incident here with 2 college graduates. We had a car at Mr. Wickham's museum called the Argonne. They said that's named after the Argonne Woods in the First World War. John Pershing. They both looked at me. I said, you know who John Pershing is? Mr. Wickham. They didn't. So I wrote a letter to the paper in which I stated college kids graduating from our school here on one of our schools don't even know who John Pershing is. Well, this teacher wrote back, angry. We teach the kids how to get by today. So I wrote how Winston Churchill said, what Santa Anna said, those who don't understand history will relive it. And this gentleman, this teacher, no, I didn't say. I said this teacher must be a member of the National Education Association, whose unwritten motto is the dumbing down of America.
Well, no, we can end it there.
All right, I know it's after 5 o'clock.
Yeah.
I want to get, but I enjoyed this. It was a lot of fun. I have to tell you, nobody visits me in New Suffolk. They're all dead, and most of the neighbors can't walk over. They're too infirm, and I'm getting there. But it's been a pleasure. I enjoyed this. I don't know what you do with this, but someday, if you get a chance and you look up, it's been done a number of years ago, if you look up the paper out here,
not the Suffolk Times?
No, the other one, the for all of Long Island.
Newsday?
Newsday. Look it up and look up Elmhurst. I did a film for them showing the old parts in Elmhurst, taking them to the church where George Washington prayed, showing the biggest Elks Club in the world, showing one of the 7 wonders of the system we have, the subway system, showing them the biggest central office in the world that's in Elmhurst, showing them the schools, showing them where Casey, the head of the CIA, lived. He went to public schools. There was something about that with the church. I told her where some of the actors were. George Shearing, if you remember, the blind conductor, he wrote nice music, and he lived in the neighborhood. The umbilical cord, now, that was used for the spacemen to go out in, was made in Elmhurst by Precision Instruments. It was all gold. And when I wanted to put a plaque in front of the house they used, They didn't want it. They went out of business. They closed the business. But that was something I thought was interesting for the world to see.
Yeah.
I mentioned how the old Elmwood Theater, I saw Marlon Brando, Red Buttons, Bob Hope, that would do these for a movie tour.
But thank you so much for coming on and
It's my
telling your
pleasure. I'm
story.
sorry. It was like the highlight of my day. Now I'm going to go home and I'm going to eat a big black and white cookie and a glass of milk and probably take a nap. That's what you can do when you're old.
Yes.
So with that, as the sun sets in the west, I bid you a fond farewell. Having done my duty as God gave me the light to see that duty, if you remember who said that. A fond farewell.
Well, I hope you enjoyed episode 71 with Thomas McKenzie. I want to thank you for listening to the Floyd Memorial Library podcast, and we'll see you next time.